Hi, my name is Tanya Devlin, and with me today are Morrnah Simeona and Dr. Hugh Lin. Today we'll be talking about a traditional healing method of relieving stress and developing yourself spiritually. This process is called Ho'oponopono. First of all, I'd like to find out how you got involved or developed this process. Morrnah?
I was familiar with the old method they called the Ho'oponopono, which is being practiced in Honolulu today. But this is my method because I've updated it, and I did have this in other lifetimes.
In other lifetimes?
Before I was born in this lifetime. And for me, I think we have had lifetimes after lifetimes and experiencing different lifetimes from time to time.
During the process of coming to know or going through the process of Ho'oponopono, is it learning more about ourselves and discovering these past identities?
The thing that we do is that we have a memory, and I think most of the people don't understand that there are three selves to them, and they have the father, the mother, and the child. And unless the family are together, it is really hard to say you contacted divinity. So the way we teach is very simple. We have a book, and the students can look at the book. And the idea is that they start with themselves and end with themselves. So instead of blaming others for the problem, we blame ourselves, and the cleaner we are, the better situations may be.
So it's really a method of centralizing our problems and eliminating that.
That's right. But I think the most important thing in the whole thing is the idea of how do you, as a person, look at divinity or God? Is he out in the boondock, or is he right with you? But for us, the divinity is in your heart. So why look outside?
From my personal experience in looking at religion, I had learned the method of relying on other sources of healing my spiritual self. And it seems that I've struggled with a lot of problems in learning that I can't have anybody else carry that burden or learn or heal that process. But this is a method of centralizing that.
Well, I think it's unique because instead of us having another person tell us, we ask the divinity to, because he created us, and no one else has created us except the divinity.
In this process, you're bonding with the divinity in order to understand what needs healing.
Well, I think when the person knows by the technique that we teach, he is able to do it himself. And the error is not outside, it's always within himself. And if he clears it, situations outside will clear itself.
Dr. Lin, could you tell us a little of the background and experience that you had working in the institutions?
Yeah. I'm a clinical psychologist by training. And the people I work with, or I did work with for 5 years, were what we called criminally and mentally ill. And these are people who have either killed or raped or murdered someone and then got adjudicated being insane. So these are people I've had an opportunity to work for 5 years. And one of the things I discovered in working with them is that their problems really are our problems. That if we are willing to look just at ourselves and really release the judgments we have of them or other people, they really get well. That's been my experience, just by working on ourselves. So what I used to do at the institution is I did not have therapy. I didn't have any therapy, didn't talk to anybody. That all of the work that I did at home. I did between myself and the divinity, asking the divinity, what is it that I needed to do to clear myself with the patient, and then what he felt would be right to do with the patient. So didn't talk to them, didn't have a therapy, just between myself and the divinity and asking what needed to be done.
Does this reflect that we have a lot of judgment that everybody tends to thrust upon each other?
Well, what happens is that the people that come into our lives are people who come into our lives so that we can let go of them. Let go of whatever judgment, whether it's our children, or whether it's our parents, or whether it's the people that we, in quotes, work with, whether it's alcoholics or people who are mentally ill. They come into our lives because we have created some problems with them. And by our releasing the judgments and the expectations, the problems with them, they get better. So it's not them, it's always us.
So is it a part of, like what I hear from time and time again is that, well, history repeats itself. Another thing is that spiritually, sometimes within churches, they tell us that the sins of our fathers fall upon us, or in the medical field that we do inherit problems of our parents. Now, how is that? Do you deal with that?
Yeah, I mean, most of what we deal with are what Morrnah talked about, memories. And so, you know, we've had experiences of meeting people for the first time and saying to ourselves, "Boy, I've met her before." Mm-hmm. Or we've been to places where we say to us, "I've been here before." And you have, because your subconscious has that memory of having met that person or being at a particular place. So if you have judgments about places and people, it's because you have had a memory of them that was hurtful. So this process is that you ask the divinity whatever error you have created that causes you to react, or you asking it to be transmuted or released.
So we really have, how would you describe the three different parts of ourselves again?
Yeah, the superconscious is called the Omakua, and is the parental father, and the Uhani is the conscious mind or the processor, and the Unihipili is the computer. It remembers all the way back till you were a speck of dust in the horizon.
Or another way to put it is that the superconscious represents the spiritual part of your being, and that's that part that connects you into the divinity. So you are always connected to divinity. There is never a moment in your creation where you're not connected. And there's another part called, what Morrnah calls the conscious, what we call the mental, the psychologists call it. When I went to the University of Iowa, they call it conscious mind, the mental part. And then the subconscious being the physical part of our being. So who we are is spirit, mind, and body. And as we understand our identity and who we are, then we know that three of them have a specific function. For example, one of the things I learned at the University of Iowa that it was important to think. In our process, it's not, because the conscious mind doesn't know anything. It is a subconscious who has much of the information that you need. So what we teach people is the three aspects of their being, which is their self-identity, and then being able to deal with that relationship between the mother and the child, or the conscious and the subconscious, which is the most important relationship in all creation. That's where the problems lie.
So, thinking through what has gone on through the process of us growing as human beings, we've learned through the educational system and the importance of how we develop ourselves. We have really tuned in more to what's going on right now, and the intelligent portion of ourselves. And we've left behind the development of the other two selves.
What has happened is that we no longer come as children. That we come with all of our intellect, but our intellect is not sufficient to really handle the problems. For example, in the area of schizophrenia, we have a lot of research on mental illness, but when you really look at our track record, with all the information we have, people don't get well who have that problem. They must be managed with drugs or with behavior mod. But the process that we're teaching, you're actually going to the cause and not having to deal with the behavior. When you erase the cause, much of the symptoms and the effects go.
So it's, in understanding it, it's like a child being born within each one of us as we learn this, and it's developing that child. So we've come full circle.
It's actually developing a loving relationship with yourself, between the conscious and the subconscious, the mother and the child. That is the most important relationship. That once you learn that relationship, that child will be able to do anything for you, because it's a subconscious that does everything. You know? It breathes for you, your heartbeat, metabolizes.
Looking at the process, or for example, use myself as an example. My father is experiencing diabetes, and I have taken him from hospital to hospital and doctor to doctor, and I haven't really sat down and talked with him. How could I best help him?
I think Morrnah can really tell you more about that.
In our line of work, we feel that by having the person clear herself up, it will be worked out very well.
So the problem basically is not a physical problem. The physical problem is only the symptoms of the effects. What we deal with is the cause, which are the, in the subconscious, the hurts and the pains that generate that illness. That means then, instead of dealing with the symptoms like dieting and all that, those techniques, what the divinity says, we got to go to the cause. That once we erase the hurts and the pains of whatever is in the computer that causes that disease, then it'll lift. My father is diabetic, and so I've had an opportunity to ask the divinity what I needed to do, and I have to clean up my relationship with him. And as I clean my relationship with him, my father gets better.
In the process of the way we've developed as a race, and considering the past, with the missionary presence, and this happened all over the world, not just in Alaska, or the introduction of foreign values, do you find it difficult sharing some information, like with your father, if he's put into himself some of the reflections of those different aspects?
Yeah, I don't have, fortunately, I don't have to deal with that, because all I do is talk to the divinity. I don't need to talk to my father.
So it's not necessarily to involve him.
No, so
directly.
I ask the divinity, what is it that, since I'm concerned, that means that I have a tie with my father. As I let my father go, the divinity can do his work. So it's just between me and the divinity. It's not between me and my father, because only the divinity can release me. So if I talk to my father, he can't release me. I can't. You know? So if I talk to the divinity can release me. So that's basically what we do. Just between, like Morrnah said, between man and the divinity is our process, not man to man.
In the process of looking around and searching for answers to some of the problems that exist today, whether it's alcoholism or suicide or depression, a lot of self-help groups have been developed. And I have gone to some meetings and listened just to how these groups function. And perhaps I haven't paid attention, but is there a possibility that someone could depend more upon the group or the dynamics of the friendships that they develop, or?
That's a possibility. And yet, if from our side of looking at it, it is only a memory, because we don't know, we really don't know what triggered the person to have diabetes or to be on drugs or whatever they may be. So we're not apt to be judgmental on those points.
And so it's all right if people feel like that's where they need to go. I mean, if they need that kind of support. But where we're coming from is that you have to ask the fundamental question, who created you? And if God created you, then if there is a flaw someplace, then it's only to go back to the Creator who can correct the flaw. So this process doesn't require you being with another person, but your willingness to be with the divinity and asking the divinity, can you tell me what errors that I committed that I can be released from? So this disease, blindness, or whatever problems you have to be, whether it's a relationship, can go. It's just you and the divinity.
So it really centralizes rather than teaches us to look to other sources of healing or
which is really neat, because then you don't have to wait for somebody else to do their stuff. You can just begin it on yourself, you know.
And I think people have a tendency to feel that the other person is wrong, but actually we started with ourselves and our opinions in looking at a situation of the other person or a plant or a thing, a machine or whatever it is. The difference with our concept is that we work on people, on trees, on animals, on plants, sand, rocks, and whatnot. Because in every one of those are God's manifestations, and they do have the three selves.
Now, you've gone back to the United Nations and spoke to them.
We've given 3 classes at the United Nations. And we didn't find any difficulty there because, and we have Muslims and people of different denominations, but however, they were just looking at themselves.
Which makes room for better decisions.
Oh, it is true.
And you're not interested in really changing people, whether they're alcoholics or people on drugs, or even your kids, like my daughter. That's not my job. My job is just to work on me. I mean, I have enough stuff without my having to go look out and take care of somebody else. But the beautiful part about what we do is, like in the case of my daughter, as I work on judgments I have about her, then she's free and she can go. She can follow the path that divinity has for her, not what I think, because I'm just a man. I didn't create her. He created her, and he's saying to me, just take your stuff off of her. Let her go. Set her free.
So in a way, we can cast a veil of doubt on them, on our children, when we, like I say, take on doubt or judgment or any of those negative.
Yeah. One of the really fundamental problems we have as human beings is that we don't realize that we don't know. We absolutely don't know. So if any patient comes to me, or my daughter is having a problem, or even I don't know what the problem is. So I ask the divinity who created me. Then he can tell me what it is, and then he can tell me how I can treat that. We don't know.
And that's the hardest thing to keep remembering.
Yeah.
Would you describe the different planes or the theory that what might be good for your daughter or yourself are totally different?
Yeah. What happens is that, for example, if people who have drug problems or alcohol problems or people who are schizophrenics, because they're individual people and have individual blueprints, their problem of alcoholism may be very different from somebody else's problem, even though they look like they have the same problem. The memories and the histories are different. So since divinity knows the problems and knows their blueprint, we go back and ask the divinity, and the treatment for this person will be very different from the treatment for that person. So we don't give group treatment, because everybody has a different rhythm. And what stress is being out of rhythm with the divinity. So the definition for us, stress is when you're out of rhythm. So you're asking the divinity, how can I be placed back into rhythm again? It's that you created me and you can heal me.
Not to, I'm trying to find a nice way to ask you, because a lot of people question, how does Jesus as Christ or as a teacher fit into this, or does he at all?
I tell you what is very important is Jesus is in a sense like you and I, that we are creations of the divinity. So Jesus and I have the same Father. So in a sense, what we're teaching is that you have the ability to go directly to the Father. You have it, it's innate in you. You were created that way. The only difference between us and plants and rocks is that the divinity gave us choice. So we can either do the Father's will or not. Plants and animals don't have that ability. So the only question is whether the Father and you are one, and it's your choice, you know?
And I also think that people misunderstood when Jesus said, Father and I are one. He meant that the Father is within his heart, and they are one, but they felt he deserved a more lordly position, but no. He just meant that every one of us, like you are holy, and the cameraman is holy, and Dr. Hewlin is holy, because he has the divinity in his heart.
And
You
even
could easily ask them.
even the cameras and the chairs,
They all have that.
every manifestation has the amakua, the spiritual connection with the divinity. But we're always connected. It's the choice that we make consciously. We think we know better, and we don't ask the divinity. And we give people our opinions as to how they can heal themselves. But for me now, just for me, it's arrogance to say that we know how to heal somebody that the divinity created, and we didn't create that person.
Before we came in, we were talking a little bit about the studio or anything that we're involved with, and that those can hold a spirit of whatever happened there before.
The walls here and whatever it is, and the chairs, and or even the camera remembers the conversation that was before. So this is all cleaned up.
And that's a part of the teaching that you share.
Yes, the teaching is that it's important to free everything. So to come to the studio, we need to free the studio of whatever went on before, so that you and I and Morrnah and everyone can be free in the moment instead of being pulled by thought forms that other people left here. So it's clean, and now we're here. It's shielded. We won't get any interference from outside, and we can just enjoy ourselves, you know?
My brother once told me that within the native peoples here in Alaska, that when a family went to visit a family, that when you came in to visit, after the visit was finished, the visiting family would leave. Well, it was in tradition that the host family would go to the door, the entire family, and wave their arms and speak to them and tell them to take the spirits that you brought with you and release that. Is that a little bit
Somewhat
similar to what you're teaching?
Yeah, what we do is we do it before we get there and after we leave. We clean whatever past ties we have with the land and the building and the people we're going to be. Like tonight we're going to go to a party, so we clean that up. So when we go, we don't go with any judgment. We can be free, be joyous, and then when we leave, we cut our ties again and go home.
For example, Dr. Helen and I were working on a person, and so we were outdoors. I love the trees. So while we were sitting, I mentally put a tent around us, over and around, and I zipped up the door. And when we were through, the branch was leaning right near the tent in this area, said, "We couldn't even hear you." So I said, "It's none of your business." So this is what I think in most therapies that they do, that when you touch a person, some of the elements within the person, memories, would ooze out and go out into the universe. So you, the operator, are responsible for that. And so we're interested in helping other people, but are we not interested in helping ourselves?
So that's the gift that you bring.
Yeah, and I've said it many times that if I worked on myself constantly, and so if the whole world was to fall apart, I still work on myself. I don't happen to be interested in another person because I may not be able to save myself.
Let me give you an example of that. When I worked at Hawaii State Hospital, one of the judgments I had was that our staff would be verbally abusive to patients. They'd call them crazy or schizoid, that kind of names. And I had a lot of stuff about that. I thought it was wrong. And so one day I was watching a staff calling a patient crazy, and as my judgment was coming out, I heard this voice said, "Do you know that if you cleaned up your judgment, that would stop?" And so as I began to work on my judgment of people having judgment about other people, as I began to work on it, it took a year, but in our building, we don't have any more of that. I didn't have to talk to the person. All I did was work on myself. Just me, not out there. Out there is just a reflection of me.
In your travels, do you find a lot of this that is reflective in other cultures, that they strive for something like this, or is this a whole new process?
Well, from my own standpoint, I don't know about Dr. Hulin, but I find that in going to other countries, they are searching and waiting for something similar to that. Now, in Germany, they speak in German, we don't understand, but they certainly know better than we do. We look at the outside, and they look on the inside. It's a different approach, but very same.
The neat thing about the process that we teach is that it doesn't unseat anybody's religious belief, cultural belief, political belief. We're not talking about any of that. We're just talking about who you are. And so my experience in Germany, all Denmark, across the United States, in China, Japan, where we have been, people are just interested in finding themselves. And they search, but what they don't realize is that it's already there. They don't have to go 1 inch outside of themselves. So people really, as we travel around the world, are really searching for peace. But what they don't realize is peace begins here, not out there.
One thing that we talked about earlier, we just touched on, was through the media, the television, and how that acts as bringing in a lot of things into individual homes. And you mentioned that it is important to be careful as to what comes into your home. Would you touch on that real briefly?
Morrnah can tell you about the shield that we use. Okay. But have to realize that the subconscious in you is like a little child. It has no discretion. It doesn't know right from wrong. So if you're sitting in front of a TV set, or if you're sitting in front of a movie, if you're not shielded, or if you don't take care of that, all of the data will go inside of you. The computer will pick it all up. So the process that we teach is you can put a screen across the TV set. So if your children or grandchildren or you are sitting, as the vibration comes through the screen, it gets cleansed. So when the information hits you, it hits you without any of the emotion, the hurt, the pain. Yeah, you can do that just with your mind. You don't have to say to somebody, I don't like that TV program, turn it off. This one, just put the screen and let the divinity do his work of screening out the stuff.
Another point of view that we can bring would be the people who will be viewing it are people who actually want to or are searching for their own self-identity. They said, well, that's something new I would like to learn. That would be another viewpoint.
Would you read in closing the prayer?
I am the I.
Should I say the beginning or just a prayer?
Whatever you would like to share.
I come forth from the void into light. I am the breath that nurtures life. I am that emptiness, that hollowness beyond all consciousness. The I, the id, the all. I draw my bow of rainbows across the waters, the continuum of minds with matters. I'm the incoming and the outgoing of breath, the invisible, untouchable breeze, the undefinable atom of creation. I am the I. And to the general public who are listening, I would like to say the peace of I. May I? Peace be with you, all my peace. Peace that is I, peace that is I am. Peace for now and always, forever and evermore. My peace I leave with you. My peace I leave. Not the world's peace, but only my peace, the peace of I. I thank you very much for listening.
And thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you very much. I'm Tanya Devon.